this lesson, we're going to be unpacking pentadic ratios. This is basically the structure that Burke gives us to interpret the findings that are present when we've finished our pentadic steps, right? So we remember the 5 steps of the pentad very clearly: the act, the agent, the agency, the scene, the purpose. All of those come to us and basically show us the drama that is being portrayed inside our artifact. So they reveal the drama. They tell us what is taking place. They tell us who's doing that act. They tell us what tools are being used to accomplish that act. They tell us the setting, the ambience, the situation in which the act is occurring. And they give us the purpose, the intention. What was the act for? What was it supposed to accomplish? What is the intent, if you will, of the act? What was it going for? All right. So those are the elements of the pentad: clear, plain, and simple. We're going to lay those out at the bottom, and we're going to explore ratios. Now, ratios are supposed to explain to us the relationship between each element in the pentad, how the agent is related to the scene, how the agency is related to the agent, how the purpose is related to the act, or the act to the scene, or the scene to the agency. Any combination here of 2 elements of the pentad will form a ratio. So the goal of that ratio is essentially to describe the relationships that exist between these various elements inside the pentad. Now, how is it going to do that? How is it going to describe the relationship between the agent and the scene, or the purpose and agency? How is it going to explore that? Well, there's a very direct, clear answer in Burke's mind. He thinks of each element of the pentad being associated with some particular worldview. Almost a philosophic position. So he thinks that if you've got an agent aspect of your drama, then you're looking at one kind of worldview, whereas if you've got a purpose agent, you're looking at a different kind of worldview. So each particular element of the ratio gives some kind of perspective on the worldview that's present in your artifact. It gives you a way to interpret your drama. Now, as a critic, your job is to figure out which element in the pentad is the one that is most clearly defining the artifact, dominating the artifact. What's the dominant element? The element that seems to most completely give us the sense of what this artifact is about, the one that most completely controls the artifact. That's what a ratio does. It finds that aspect of your artifact, your text, that is most clearly featured. So what's the star of the drama is sort of the question. That's the first question in the ratio. What's the aspect of the ratio that is dominating others? Maybe it's the scene. Maybe it's the agent. Maybe it's the act itself. What's the hero? What's the defining aspect of this artifact? Now, once we have that defining aspect down, we'll go on to look at how, if you say, the scene is what's controlling this, then we'll go on and we'll look at how the scene might be controlling agency or might be controlling act. We'll take a look at that in a moment. But I want to start with this idea that we are looking for the thing that dominates the artifact. What is the aspect of the drama that is most essential to this artifact? Now, there's not like a right and wrong answer here. As we've said, there can be some ambiguity in this, and we'll explore that ambiguity a little bit. But you want to create a sense, as a critic, you're creating a sense that you understand this agent, let's say. You understand agent as the dominant element that is functioning inside this artifact. And once we know that agent is the dominant element, then we'll back up and we'll look at the worldview that is associated with agent, and we'll use that worldview to unpack how the motives and structures of this artifact are functioning. So let's take a look at each of these 5 elements of the pentad and what it is they are actually doing. All right. So if act is your dominant element, if we come in and we discover that the act itself is what's really dominating this particular message, this particular artifact, then basically act is this sense, this feel that there's a sort of common sense aspect to life. There's a sense of how things really are. And it's best if you just figure that out and go with it. So basically, that's what act emphasizes. It emphasizes that sort of common sense understanding that, hey, you know what? This is what you really got to work with, and you don't have a lot of other options, and that's how you're going to get through life best. Burke calls this realism. Realism for Burke is this theory that says, in essence, look, things are out there, and it doesn't much matter what you think about them or whether you like or dislike them. It's just a cold, hard world out there, and you got to deal with that kind of reality that's out there. In a situation like that, Burke says, language is essentially used to describe that world. It's used to navigate what's true and false in the world, to figure out the true-false, and structure things so that your actions can have consequences that you like. But don't get carried away here. You have some limited options because the world is just not very interested in what you think or want, okay? So that's the idea of act. So if act is the dominant aspect of the Pentad, these are the sorts of ideas that Burke says you can expect to see appearing as the motivational core of your artifact. So these are the things that will help you interpret your artifact. Act, realism, that's the first of the pentadic associations in Burke's mind. The second is agent. Now remember, the agent is the one who's doing the act. And Burke has the idea, this he calls idealism. In this view, if the agent is what's featured, if that's the dominant aspect of your artifact, then Burke says, look, this is an emphasis on this kind of an idea that says, hey, you know what? You choose your own path. You know what? You just go out, you make your own choices, and you just stick with it. It's your will, your self-determination that may change things in the world. So you can go out and you can, in fact, structure your own world. You can build it the way you want to. Agent, when agent is the dominant aspect of the text, agent features idealism, which is a kind of theory that reality, at least the most important parts of reality, are really just mental in nature. You can construct, you can build your very own kind of reality, and you do it through your own actions. You do it through your own commitments, your will and self-determination. That's what's being forwarded. These are the ideas. If the agent is the dominant aspect of the message, then these are the ideas that you can expect to find driving the message forward, providing the core of the motives that you'll find inside your message. All right, third, agency. This is what Burke calls pragmatism. If agency is the dominant aspect of your message, then Burke says the philosophy, if you will, that is dominating the motivational structures inside your message, it will be pragmatism. And pragmatism just says, hey, look, if this is what gets the job done, well, then that's fine. We'll go with that. That's all that matters. What matters is getting the job done, okay? So this pragmatism in Burke's mind is sort of a theory that says, hey, you got to take up what you've got right there. Deal with what you have at hand. And if you deal with that well, that's what's going to lead to success. All right, it's an emphasis on what's available to you to use. What are the tools that are out there that you can work with? And it sort of assumes that whatever leads to a good outcome, that's good. That's what it boils down to. If it leads to a good outcome, we're going to call that good. So if you're looking at an artifact, and that artifact seems to privilege, seems to forward, seems to emphasize, highlight agency as the sort of defining quality of the drama that it portrays, then that emphasis on agency will probably include these kinds of ideas. If it gets the job done, that's what matters, because whatever gets us to a good outcome, that's a good thing. And we got to focus on the tools that are available right at hand. Be practical. Those are the ideas that will be present where agency dominates the message. Scene. Okay, scene is what Burke thinks of as materialism. And in scene, if that's what emphasizes, if that's what the text, the artifact is emphasizing, if that's what's highlighted, if that's the core, if that's the star of the show, the setting, the scene, Burke says you can expect this. This idea is probably going to be what dominates. It's like stuff That's what really matters. That's what really makes the world go round. It's not built on hopes or dreams or truth, beauty, and goodness. None of that nonsense. You know what makes the world go around? Stuff. That's the view of materialism. It's a theory that the world is only composed of matter. It's just really, it's just hard cash. That's all that counts in this worldview. All right. And we have this sense that physical or material conditions, they exercise control over any ability to construct messages or to inspire and move people. You gotta hit them in the pocketbook, right? Is sort of the idea here. If seen is what stars in the drama, if that's the star of the show, then these are the ideas that you're going to see coming up inside that message. These are going to be the assumptions that you're going to have to make for this message to really get you moving somewhere. It's a theory that the world's composed only of matter. Those are the ideas that are going to be driven behind this. Well, okay, that brings us finally to purpose. Purpose is something that Burke associates with the idea of mysticism as a kind of worldview. Now, don't get too freaked out here. This is not a big deal, religious mysticism. That's not what he's talking about. He means by this the idea. When Burke talks about mysticism, he means basically the idea that there are somehow these valuable secrets in the world, and they're hidden. They're not really going to be found by pure calculated rationality. You could read here, they're not going to really be found by dealing with pure calculated materialism, right? Because mysticism often stands in tension with materialism. For Burke, mysticism is this idea that there's something you can gain. You can gain some knowledge, and read the word knowledge here really loosely. You can gain some insight of reality that's just not accessible to sense perceptions and to rational thought. You can't sit down with a calculator and work out what really, really matters here. And in a situation like this, Burke says the language, and he means, again, loosely, he means symbol systems. The language goes through this sort of metamorphosis. It's kind of always adjusting, changing, adapting. And it has to do that because real meaning, the real stuff that matters, the secrets of the world, they're often hidden, and they rarely just show themselves and appear. And so if mysticism, that is to say, if purpose is featured as the star of the show, the dominant aspect of this particular moment, if that's what's going on, well, then you can expect the language to be often kind of dealing in metaphors and constantly adjusting and adapting. That's basically the idea. If purpose dominates, if that's the star of the show, these are the ideas that you can expect to see coming up in that kind of a message. That sort of an artifact will forward these deep ideas. Okay. That gets us to pentadic ratio. A pentadic ratio is where one thing, one element of the pentad overarches, defines, situates all the other elements. As a critic, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that element that overarches and defines all the other elements. But also, you're going to focus in on that secondary aspect of this. So the dominant element is the one that is the aspect of the pentad that we have said is the star of the show. It's the one that overarches all the others. But, Burke says, once you do that, it's going to overarch the other four. Okay, that's clear. That's plain. But Burke says, once you have figured out what you understand as the dominant aspect of the pentad, the second question you've got to do, you got to go recognize, you have to find as a critic, the other aspect of the pentad that is most influenced by that dominant one. So you have a dominant aspect of the pentad. It's always, it's going to dominate all four others, but which of those other four does that dominant aspect most influence, most shape up, most direct? Burke portrays his pentadic ratios, sometimes with a colon. Sometimes he puts a dash between them, but that's how he thinks of them. He thinks of them as an AB, a dominant aspect of the pentad, and the other aspect of the pentad that is most at the service of or submitted to or influenced by that dominant aspect. That's the issue that you as a critic are looking for. Now, these elements can be any of the 5 aspects of the pentad, okay? You could have a dominant act and it most dominating the agency. You could have a scene purpose. Well, that should be correctly spelled, but you could have a scene purpose ratio. You could have an agent-act ratio. You could have a scene-agent ratio. You can have an agent-agency ratio. You can have an act-purpose ratio. You can have any ratio combination that you can imagine out of the aspects of the pentad. Any one of those aspects can fit into any other. The important thing is that A, the dominant aspect in this drama, the dominant aspect A, is influencing most B, the secondary aspect of the ratio. Now that influence, what we're calling this influence, that can happen in a lot of different ways. All right? It might be that A causes B. Okay, it could be that A limits the options of B. It might be that A tells us how B gets there or how to drive B out, how to exclude B, all right? So there are a lot of different ways in which this influence can be brought to bear from the dominant element to that secondary element in the pentad. So, just a quick vocabulary review. A pentadic ratio consists of a dominant element. That's the element that most controls the reading of the pentad, and a secondary element. That's the element of the pentad that is most completely, most thoroughly defined, influenced, moved by that dominant one. We know that each of these are associated, each element is associated with a certain worldview. And once we get the ratio, this worldview is most controlling that worldview. That's what Burke says you're after. That's the final step before you're really able to just nail this thing down. All right, so let's take a look at some very, very short, brief examples here. All right, so remember, we're looking for the dominant aspect and the aspect of the pentad that is most influenced by the dominant one. So when we get a statement like, yeah, the whole office changed when she started working here. Okay, so what have you got there? Well, one way to read this is to say you got an agent-scene ratio. In this artifact, you've got a ratio that suggests the will, the self-determination, the influence, the will, self-determination of one person is the influence over the material conditions of life. The person shapes the situation, the setting. So when I read this, the whole office changed when she started working here. Okay, I get it. The person is shaping the circumstance, the situation, the setting. Who's in charge here? The new worker. And what are they in charge of? What are they most dominating? What are they most influencing? The scene, the whole office scene. All right? So that's an agent scene kind of transition. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Okay. What have we got here? What does this look like? I'm going to suggest that you're looking at an agency-agent ratio here. When we unpack that, it's the agency that is actually influencing and almost controlling the agent. So in this artifact, we've got a ratio that suggests the available tools, and in this case, the available tools are power and absolute power. That's what you've got to work with, all right? So in this artifact, the available tools, the tools that you can reach, they're the things that are shaping the character and will of the person acting. Power, a tool, is shaping the character of the agent, the person. Okay, so we've got an agency-agent ratio here. Let's do one more. In a courtroom, lawyers care about winning more than they care about truth. Okay. What do you think is dominating here? I think we're looking at a scene that's dominating purpose, the intention. right? So the scene, the setting, is controlling the purpose, the intent, the sought for outcome. So if you're in a courtroom, that scene tells us that the people who are in there, they're going to be talking about winning, because that's just the way our legal system works, right? Our legal system works where when the lawyer walks in there, they're not supposed to be wondering whether or not they're portraying what's absolutely true about the situation. Their job is to portray the best possible case for their side, okay? So the scene, the setting, courtroom, dominates the intent, the purpose that is present. So in this artifact, we got a ratio that suggests the situation, the setting, that's what's shaping or controlling, most of all, the goal and intention of those who are present. Okay. Let's work on this with a little larger example now. So we took a look at this artifact last time, and we looked at the act, agent, agency, scene, and purpose. We noticed that the act is getting noticed. That's what's going on here. Okay? People trying to be heard. We asked who's trying to get noticed. It's the little people. They're being trampled. We asked, how are they doing it? Because, they're trying to annoy, they're protesting, they're screaming and making demands at the luxurious fat cat people up here who are having their party. That's our scene. And their intent was, what's the purpose of the act? What's the intent of these actors? Well, it's to stop getting walked on, to change the setting. That's what they're after. That was the goal. All right. All right, so we come now to this moment where we see, okay, there's the expanded version of the act. We've got the act blown up over here so you can see it a little bit more carefully. There it is. We're going to take a look at this, and we're going to have to ask ourselves, okay, in this situation, what is it that is dominant? What controls this? Here's the narrative. We've been given this narrative, this drama right over here. And in this drama, what is the thing that makes everything else fall into place? What do you suppose is the dominant aspect of the Pentad? Well, I'm going to suggest it's scene. Scene seems to be, that's the first thing you notice. You notice what kind of people we're looking at and what kind of an environment and kind of where they are. And we've got an ambience. We've got everything about this drama seems to forward in your face a scene. That's what seems to dominate here. What do you suppose that scene is most dominating? Well, I would suggest it's the scene controlling every other aspect of the drama, but it is mostly controlling this right here, this act. It is the scene that calls the act out, in fact, that requests the act to be present. Okay, so we kind of see we've got a scene-act ratio. Now let's work that through a little bit. Remember, scene is associated with materialism, act with realism. Scene is associated with these idea of material conditions, and act is associated with the way things really are. So that's the general way. Now we're going to bring it in here, and we're going to say, okay, what was our scene here? Excess, self-indulgence, rich fat cats doing their thing. That is what is dominating. And what is it most dominating? The need to get noticed. It's the scene in this specific case, and that's where you always go when you're doing your ratios, move from the general ideas to the specific ideas inside your drama, the drama inside your artifact. You come here and you say, oh my gosh, I get it, yeah. So this material excess, this indulgence, this rich indifference, that is what is dominating this particular drama, and it's causing the little people to need to get noticed. That's what we've got going on here. That's what's happening in our artifact. So now we see a material realist ratio in front of us, and that helps us begin to understand what kind of a motive is being shaped up here, what kind of a motive is being presented, the kind of motive that says, hey, this excess, this self-indulgence, you are creating a problem where little people are being trampled and they need to be noticed. Okay. We're beginning to see the motivational structures. Now, we said earlier that, hey, the Pentad is heuristic. It's not locked in, okay? You can go in and you can shift the scene, or you can shift the act a little bit and help you think more clearly about the message. So are the ratios, are they locked in once you've chosen the pentadic elements? No, absolutely not. Just like the elements of the Pentad, the ratio you create, you can play with that. You can sort of work with it a little bit and see what you get. So what if we, for example, shifted this? What if we changed this and we said, hey, it's not really, the scene and the act. It's the scene and the agents. Okay? Maybe that's what we want to think about as the one element of the Pentad that is most dominated by scene. Okay, so the scene seems to be the dominant aspect still. We know what that means. Materialism, material conditions, wealth, exorbitant self-indulgence, all of that is portrayed here. That's just given to us all over this drama. But maybe what that's most dominating isn't the act, but the agent. Maybe what we're looking at here is a situation where this excess in wealth and self-indulgence, that scene is dominating the little people. It's crushing the little people. At the bottom, they're standing on them. They're walking on them. The little people, that's what's being the agent. That's what's being dominated by scene more than anything else. Okay, that's a perfectly legitimate way to interpret this as well. Okay, you can go either way there. You could have a scene act, you could have a scene agent. Works just fine, no problem. The important thing is, when you begin to explain your Pentad, you explain your ratios, they all need to be consistent, they need to go together, and you need to justify your choices and explain them. That's what the critic does. The critic sets up the ratio, and then they explain, they make their own argument for why this ratio reveals something really powerful about this particular artifact. Let's take another look here. So this one also looks familiar. You will remember we had an act. That act is seduction, self-surrender. These are two people who are giving themselves to each other. Who's doing that giving, that seduction and self-surrender? The beautiful people are. What made that possible? The perfume. When and where is this? What's the scene? What's the setting here? Well, this is some vague anywhere is what that is. I mean, that's what we get here. And what's the intent? What's the purpose? Well, the purpose is romance and intimacy. That's the intention here of the agents. They intend to be intimate and have a romantic evening. That's what's going on. All right, so the beautiful people are engaged in self-surrender. They're doing that because they have been empowered by this magic perfume. And you know what? They're doing it anywhere. This could happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time. And it ends up being a romantic and intimate evening. Now, what's the dominant element here? What is controlling all the other aspects of this particular artifact? I would suggest it's the agency. The agency. I mean, first of all, it's the only thing that's in color, right? The entire thing, you get your attention called to it. The agency is what makes this possible. The agency is why they are surrendering to one another. The agency has wiped out the background. There isn't any setting. It's become all important. It's created the possibility of intimacy, so we've got agency here. So agency, we know, is associated with that idea of pragmatism. So here's the tool, the practical thing that's going to get it done, okay? Now, what do you think the agency, in this case the perfume, is most controlling? What's it in charge of more than anything else? Now, obviously it's in charge. We just went through it. It's in charge of all the other aspects of the Pentad. But which aspect of the Pentad is it most in charge of? I would suggest, myself, that it's dominating the agents. Now remember, idealism is that idea that's associated with agents, the idea that you make choices and you set your own rules and you create your own moment and reality. Pragmatism is tools. I think we've got an agency-agent ratio. That's what I think we're looking at. Now, again, there might be other ways, but absolutely, here's one way to read it. Whatever leads to a good outcome is good, okay? And what is leading to this outcome in this drama that we were given here? What's leading to that outcome? Well, our perfume is. So our perfume is obviously good. And what is that perfume, that great gift of Armani doing for us? What is it controlling? What's controlling us? It's giving us the power to shape our world and to turn it into what we want, to make it into the image we want it to be in. It gives us the power to get what we want. The perfume is in charge of the beautiful people. That's, I think, one perfectly legitimate way to read the drama that we were given inside this artifact. Now, as we've said, it's not the only way. You might, in fact, say, well, no, I think it's this. I think the agency, I'm going to stick with agency as the dominant aspect of the drama. The perfume really is in charge. But I don't think it's controlling the agents as much as it's controlling the intent of the agents, the goal of the agents. Okay, in fact, it's the perfume that is shaping the secrets in the world that you can only come to understand when you abandon yourself, your rational mind, and you give yourself over to some interior desire and reality. Oh, okay, wait a minute, hold it. That's making sense too. The perfume is the pragmatic way that we are going to control the mystical. The perfume is in charge of the intimacy. It's in charge of the romance. It makes it happen. Okay, we could go on, but I think you get the point. Right, that's the basic. That's the line. That's the fundamental aspect of what happens here. The ratios bring us closer to understanding how the motive is guiding the rhetorical artifact. What's the actual motive that is at the core of this artifact? Well, it's going to be a tension between realities. It's going to be one aspect of this drama that is overarching and influencing the others, and especially one particular other aspect of the drama. And your job as a critic is to ferret out those motivational structures that are present in the artifact by identifying the drama and isolating the ratio that most defines that drama.